why are you bringing entrepreneurs to space?
Currently, we're in a box with our thinking, and you have to go up a level to something different. One of the ways that I've discovered to do that is what's called the overview effect. When you go to space and you see the Earth from space, there's this profound effect that happens. You see the Earth without borders, and you see it without boundaries, and you realize that we're all just one human race. Each person has this very moving experience. They also witness Earth against this backdrop of vast nothingness, and it reminds them that as of right now, Earth is the only home we have, so we should probably take care of it. And so they come back just completely shifted. And so as I got to understand this phenomenon better and better and better and better, I said, what if we gave that experience to people who already have a strong disposition to make the world a better place?
Hey everyone, welcome back to Mission Daily. This is your host, Stephanie Postles, and I am joined today by an extraordinary person, Shannon Graham. Shannon, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So I know today we'll be talking about a lot of very interesting and unique things that I'm thinking we'll go into, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. Civilization design is one thing I want to talk about. Visionary leadership and how we're creating leaders of the future. And then last night we talked about some things when we were together, Indigo Children, and why being a psychopath is actually okay.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to talk about today.
All right.
So before we jump in, I'd love to have you just do a quick bio of who are you and what are you up to in the world?
Yeah. Well, I have been in the leadership development space for 20 years. And I recently, 2021, started a space agency called Astronaut. So that's a fun new project that I'm working on as well.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. So we're going to get into those things. It's funny, when we were introduced at first and I was reading your bio, I was like, okay, this person is either onto something big or they're on something. I don't know, but I'm here for it and I want to know what is happening.
The answer is both.
All of it. Yeah, I was like, okay, space coach, has coached a lot of people, charges high dollar amounts to coach people, how to create a vision. I mean, everything I was seeing, I was like, okay, this seems pretty badass. So where to start? I want to start with the story of increasing GDP of a country. I think that'd be a good place and story to start with, if you may.
Well, so my work is focused on bringing civilization to a higher expression of itself. And so if we're talking about bringing out higher levels of human potential, there's only two ways that you can do that. The first is when life forces it on you, those really uncomfortable moments where you're thrust into this situation where you're not prepared, you don't have the time, you don't have the resources, and you just have to figure it out. And in those moments, we rise to the occasion for the most part. So we tap that potential in those moments. And we've all been there. We all have moments like that. The challenge is it's not sustainable because we didn't choose that. So we have this moment of like massive tapping into our potential, and then we kind of default back to our normal way of being. So we get a taste of it. We get a glimpse of it. The other way to tap that potential is to choose it, to consciously seek out things that are beyond us, beyond our capability, beyond our understanding, beyond what we know, to challenge us to go beyond. So in the work that I do, when people work with me, the prerequisite is that they have to want to do something as far as impact that is in the realm of like moonshot, impossible level thing. So one of the people that I worked with was from New Zealand. And he came to me and he said, I want to raise the GDP of New Zealand by raising the GDC, which is gross domestic confidence. In New Zealand, there is this cultural mindset called tall poppy syndrome, which is a little bit of like a false humility. It's this mindset that basically says like, well, who am I to have a big idea? I should just, keep my head down. And it's ironic because per capita, New Zealand has some of the most innovative geniuses in the world. Some of the most world-changing technology has come from New Zealand. And so what you have is all of these geniuses and engineers and mavericks and scientists that have created this amazing technology, and then they don't believe in themselves, so they sit on it, and it never sees the light of day. So the idea was, well, what if we took those people and empowered them to believe in themselves enough to bring those ideas to the light of day, to the global marketplace? The GDP would go up as a side effect. So he presents me with that project, and we essentially cracked it by applying the Roger Bannister effect to the project.
Explain what that is.
So the Bannister effect, Roger Bannister was an athlete in the 1960s. And at that point, no one had run a sub 4-minute mile ever. And it was believed that it just couldn't be done. And even very high-level medical people believed that you would die if you did that. And so no one had ever done it. Lots of people believed you couldn't do it. And Roger Bannister said, no, I think it's possible. And people said, well, if it was possible, it'd have to be the perfect conditions and this, that, and the other thing. And he did it on a day where, it was rainy and this and that. So he totally just blew all the paradigm out of the water. The interesting thing that happened is that same year, 22 other people did it, simply as a function of them believing that something that they thought was impossible was possible.
Yep.
So what's crazy about that is it's not like he discovered some training methodology and then those 22 other people did that. It was purely a consciousness shift, an en masse potentiality upgrade. So that's pretty wild if you think about the implications of that, because what that means is one person can do one thing one time and completely up-level the potentiality consciousness for an entire group of people. Now high school kids do it for fun. That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
So we borrowed that. We said, we don't have to raise the confidence of all the geniuses and engineers and mavericks and scientists in New Zealand. If we do it right, we only have to do it with one. So we found this one guy who was probably like the underdog of them all. And he invented this brilliant rapid public transportation technology, like straight out of the Jetsons. But he didn't believe in himself. So he just sat on it. And this guy from New Zealand coached him, and he helped him improve his confidence and his ability to communicate value. That inventor got invited to India to pitch his idea to the Board of Transportation. And they said yes, to the tune of, I think it was $200 million.
Wow. That
one deal was worth 20% of the bilateral trade between New Zealand and India that year. Unprecedented. Never been done before. But what that led to was even bigger, because New Zealand's a relatively small pond, so everyone's kind of aware of everyone. And once this story got out, all the other inventors were like, if he can do it, I can do it. And then over the next 36 months, there was just this massive wave of technology that hit the world scene. And last year, technology contributed to GDP in New Zealand higher than ever before in history.
Wow.
Which is pretty awesome. Now, that's cool. What's also cool is that some of that technology is literal game-changing technology. For example, the world's most advanced early cancer detection technology. That's based off of synthesizing a bee's nose. A bee can smell a flower from over a mile away. And some Kiwi in New Zealand was like, wow, that's pretty cool technology. How could we essentially figure out how that works and program it specifically for cancer?
Smelling cancer.
Like, come on. Food preservation systems, air traffic control, algorithm efficiency systems, like all kinds of really cool stuff. So that's a story that I like to tell because it illustrates kind of the projects that I have the privilege of working on.
Wow, that's amazing. It's cool to think about the ripple effects from that one event, because yes, you have all the technologies coming out afterwards.
Yes.
And maybe if you just looked at that, it might just be a year and then it kind of dries up from the data perspective, but actually there's all these bubblings of, the ripples of that one event.
I call it ROI, Ripple of impact.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Those kind of people that you work with, do you stay in touch with to like track the continued outcomes?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, because an engagement with me is typically 36 months. So it's a long-term engagement as it is. And so I work with these people very intimately. So at the end of that 36 months, I'm likely like very good friends, if not like family with most of them. So we're very much a part of each other's lives.
I haven't heard of a coach doing it for 36 months.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
Well, it's, I've never really been one for rules. So when I started coaching, it was over 20 years ago. And coaching was like not even really a thing back then. Like you could go pretty much anywhere and be like, I'm a coach. And people would be like, Little League? Like it wasn't even a thing. So when I got into it, there weren't really any rules. And as some of it started to form and a lot of it started to become influenced by internet marketing, and a lot of it was kind of influenced a little bit by the tech scene from the perspective of like leverage and automation. And I was always more adamant and felt strongly about something that was more boutique and more intimate and deep. And I was hanging out with one of my friends at one point, and we were talking about Tony Robbins, and Tony charges $1 million to work with him one-on-one. And I was like, okay, $1 million feels a little bit like a stretch, but where could I play that feels like really good? And that 6-figure mark was like right in there. And so I said, okay, I'm going to assume there's no rules here. So if there's no rules, then I get to make it like however I want it to be. All right. Well, then what if I worked on these really big impact projects? Well, just like logically, that type of project doesn't happen overnight. Like you don't have success with something like that in like 6 months. You could certainly make some good progress, especially if you're both like really committed and whatever, but 36 months is a good dent. So I said, the ideal people that I want to work with are visionaries. So in the grand scheme of time, in the grand scheme of legacy, 36 months is nothing. So yes, as much as that is like a departure from what most people do in the industry, for a particular type of person, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, let's do that.
How do you spot someone who actually has a big vision versus just an idea, a dream? Like, what does a big visionary thinker look like to you to spot that and be like, yes, this person, we can work together because this is a longer term thing. And I also see that it could happen. Because someone could come to you and just be like, I want to build a house on a cloud. Like,
cool.
Yeah, cool. So like, how do you spot the people who actually have?
Well, there's actually some dimensionality to that, because I have a vision for civilization that I believe is ideal. So the clients that I work with all have to fit into that puzzle somehow, some way. So whether that has to do with energy or education or, there's a number of different kind of puzzle pieces that fit into this big picture, which is like the future. So each client that I work with somehow, some way fits into that. So they have to meet that kind of standard with and for me. And then on their side, I have to see that the vision is something that can have ROI, that can have massive impact, not just touch a lot of people, but also depth. And I've just gotten to the point where I can look at someone's vision and fairly immediately get a sense of whether it can do that or not. So those are two of the biggest factors that I look for. But then there's factors like the individual themselves. There's people that have visions and have ideas, and they don't have the grit to like actually walk them out, So the very first tattoo I ever got is, for the tenacious, no road is impassable, which when you endeavor to do really big things, you are going to get your ass kicked.
Yep.
You're going to hit the wall. You're going to fail. And the question is, what do you do next? And how gracefully can you be with that? And not everybody can do that. Or maybe everyone can, but not everyone is committed to that. So that's certainly a quality I look for as well.
So you're talking about the design of civilization and how when you're thinking about projects, it has to fit within a couple buckets. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, well, so we have to kind of take this back to a container of thinking, which is called the Kardashev scale. So Kardashev was an astrophysicist in the 60s, and he developed a civilization scale that's based on intelligence, specifically based on intelligence from the standpoint of energy utilization. And energy utilization meaning sources, utilizing energy from different sources and how efficiently you can utilize those sources. So as an example, solar, that's one source. Can you utilize that? Yes. Then the question is, how efficiently? So for example, we have solar panels now. Those solar panels at best absorb about 20% of the complete available energy that touches them. So not great. Getting better. So you have 3 different tiers of civilization on the Kardashev scale. You have type 1, type 2, and type 3. So a type 1 civilization is a civilization that can live in total harmony with its home planet indefinitely. So that's a big marker. It also, technologically, a type 1 civilization can utilize all of the available natural energy sources to a very high level of efficiency. So solar, wind, earth, water, all of those energy sources, that type of civilization can tap into at a very efficient level. So that's a type 1 civilization. Type 2 and type 3 starts to get a little obscure. It starts to get a little sci-fi because then you're talking about like Dyson sphere technology, which is like a contraption that encapsulates the sun and captures the energy and beams it back to the home planet. At a type 2 level, you have like galactic space travel available to you.
So we're not there yet, you're saying? We're not type 2.
No. So
we're not even type 1.
We're not. But we're not as far off as people might think. We're actually, as of today, we are 0.7. So that's pretty good. We're not far. It's speculated that type 1 status will happen in the next 100 to 200 years. I think it'll be much sooner than that.
And is that like, then we're basically utilizing the energy from the earth or from the sky to a percentage that maybe like 90% or something, or is it 100?
It doesn't have to be 100, but it's high.
Okay.
It's like over the threshold of like the tipping point of efficiency.
Okay.
So I believe, my part of my goal is to get civilization to that point in the next 50 years. And I believe it's completely possible for 2 reasons. A, because technology is advancing so rapidly. Think about the last 100 years of technological advancement, and then think about the last 10.
Yep.
The last 10 compared to the last 90 is like exponential.
The last 1 compared to the last 100, it's like,
completely.
It just happened.
Completely. Look at how far AI has come along.
Yeah, that's
in the last 24 months. So think about where it'll be in 10 years. Not just AI, technology. Because look at how we're integrating or utilizing GPT at this point. We're using it as a tool to help us gain insights and knowledge and perspective on different things. So imagine when it has the capacity to do that at a much bigger and multidimensional scale. Like, hey, how do we build a solar panel that absorbs 80% of the available energy? So there will be this like escape velocity moment where technology helps take us technologically to a completely different level. And then concurrently, our consciousness evolves with that. So we're not just using GPT to like create cooler cat memes and stuff like that. We're using it to like truly advance civilization. So that's what we have to look forward to.
So why why would us being able to work with energy sources better advance human consciousness? Or like, I'm wondering, like, it doesn't seem like just because one's happening doesn't mean people are,
Yes,
thinking differently.
that's true. So that's why both. So, well, it's not completely true. They're related, but they're separate. So technological advancement does not necessarily mean consciousness advancement, but it can point to it in some very direct ways. Because a large part of what's holding consciousness back is fear and survival. So when people are in a consciousness of fear and survival, it's difficult for them to expand their consciousness to higher levels because they're in such a particular mode of operation. When the age of abundance hits, and it's going to hit hard, then survival and fear go away. And when survival and fear go away, then you can begin to use all that energy and bandwidth for higher levels of being. So that's one way that they connect. The other way is what we're seeing a lot of is these personality profiles and different types of modes of understanding ourselves. Myers-Briggs, human design, gene keys, Dark Triad, right? The list goes on and on.
Which we will talk about Dark Triad.
Oh yeah. There's so many of these things that are coming out that are essentially helping us understand ourselves better. We're in an age of transforming our identities beyond our role, beyond kind of our typical like transactional value to something much bigger than that. And these modalities are helping us have a grasp on that. And the internet is what's allowing millions of people to have access to that. So that is another way that those two are kind of helping each other.
Yeah, it's fun thinking about the internet and what it's done, because on one side, like we were talking about last night, people can say it's done a lot of damage and a lot of bad things. But on the other hand, it's created a lot of desire. Where people can see other people's lives and then see their way out of their own life. If they're like, this doesn't feel good, and I see this person lives in my hometown and they have a very different reality that they're experiencing. And so a lot of that has actually been really good because it's shown people another way of being that they couldn't embody on their own. And they couldn't feel that if you only can see 5 people that you live with, or the community that you're in.
Completely. And just simply the access to information. I heard a story recently of a tribe in Africa way out in the middle of nowhere, and that tribe didn't have money. Their livestock was essentially their currency. And their livestock was being killed by these lions. And so it's basically like, imagine you wake up and a good portion of your income is just gone, or your currency is gone. Like, that's tough, right? One of the little boys in the family went to like the little tiny library in the town, got on the internet and went to YouTube, figured out a way to create motion sensor and light and sound alarms.
Wow.
And with only the scrap from around the town, built this fully functional system. So the lions would approach, the motion sensor would go off, the lights would turn on, the sound would be really loud, and they would run away.
Oh my gosh.
Saved their entire livestock. The freaking internet.
So I could go on and on. But the access to information and to your point, the access to perspective is changing everything.
Yeah. So to jump into what you're doing now, why are you bringing entrepreneurs to space and visionary leaders and other people as well? But what's behind that?
Well, so in order to reach type 1 status, there has to be this evolution in consciousness, because we can't solve our problems with the same level of thinking that created them. It was either Kanye West or
definitely not Kanye West
or Einstein that said that. One of those two.
It'd be funny if the quote Start going around
Yeah.
Kanye West.
Yeah.
Per Shannon Graham.
Hey, he deserves it. He's a genius in his own right. But we can't solve all problems with the same level of thinking that created them. So the challenge with that is that currently we're in a box with our thinking. Our current mode or operating system of thinking is what's called problem solution thinking. Mm-hmm. So you have a problem and therefore you must solve it. And up till this point in civilization, that's been a useful type of way to think, because when you're in survival mode or just life in general, there's going to be problems. That's just how it is. So you must solve those problems in order to keep on going. Okay, that's cool. But if you're a hammer, everything is a nail. If your life is predicated on solving problems, then what happens is subconsciously that becomes part of your identity. And the danger with that is that when you solve problems, subconsciously you plant seeds within that solution that bring more problems. Last night I used the example of the cell phone. The cell phone is a brilliant invention. It's helped connect people all over the world, and especially the smartphones. People are creating content with their phones and posting it online within the same day and having millions of people be able to access that. That's pretty cool. It's also crippled social skills. It's also caused kids to be addicted to screens. It's, there's the hard ingredients of a phone are geologically challenging for a number of reasons, right? So this solution has brought with it a number of problems. Well, how convenient, because we love to solve problems. That's what we do. So now we're in this constant spiral of problem, solution. So the consciousness has to kind of you have to step off the hamster wheel and you have to go up a level to something different, which is what I call end-to-end solutions, which is there is no seed of problems that get planted into this thing. It just gets to exist as a whole solution. And it's not to say that we'll live in a world that there won't be problems, but our approach to them, our approach to creating things won't have that subconscious necessity for solving problems, which will be a game changer, because then that completely alleviates us from having to be stuck in that loop, and it allows us to focus on bigger and better things.
Yeah, a little side tangent. I was working with this, we'll call him spiritual teacher type of person.
Yeah.
And he was actually talking about this concept of how we essentially all day are training our brain that we just love problems.
Yeah.
And we want them. And every time we solve it, then we're like, yes. And then if we don't have one, we're like, this is kind of boring.
Right.
And our brain is used to wanting to help us. And so he taught this practice of how to work with your brain to get out of that beingness in your body of constantly wanting to solve problems. And it was super simple. And at first I was like, I don't know about this. And he's like, all you need to do is close your eyes. And every time a thought comes into your mind, say what it is. And don't add a story to it. It can not be a story. It's just need to walk my dog. And then you add the word thought after it. And, thinking about my interview, thought. And he had me sit there with him with my eyes closed. And he's like, keep going until, keep going. And at first there was so many things in my brain. Need to make dinner for my kids, thought. Need to drive them here, thought. It wouldn't stop. And I was I thought in my brain, it's never going to stop.
Yeah.
And then it got to a point where it did.
Right.
And then it was 20 seconds of quiet, 40 seconds, 2 minutes of quiet. And he was like, that space in between right there, that's your true self. And that's how you show your body that you are not your thoughts and that you don't want to keep always solving problems. Because if you have an actual problem, you need to solve it from that space, that quiet space.
Yeah.
Because if not, your brain's going to keep trying to help you. And when it learns, oh, wait, that one didn't help you? Okay, here's another one.
Yeah.
Here's another. Oh, wait, these aren't helping you? Okay, maybe I'm going to pause a bit. And it retrains your entire nervous system.
Yeah.
And I've started doing this anywhere, walking, driving, anywhere I am. And I can feel a noticeable difference and realize that I had never actually, no matter how much I meditate, yoga, I had never actually found a way to clear my brain.
Yeah.
And it was this practice. So it's very similar to what you're talking about. It's we're going to keep trying to find problems if we allow our operating system to keep working that way.
Yeah, exactly right. So we have to figure out a way to think different. And similar to tapping potential, there's only a handful of ways to do that. One of the ways that I've discovered to do that is what's called the overview effect. And the overview effect is when you go to space and you see the Earth from space, there's this profound effect that happens where you see the Earth without borders and you see it without boundaries. And you realize that we're all just one human race. And so each person has this very moving experience. They also witness Earth against this backdrop of vast nothingness. And it reminds them that as of right now, Earth is the only home we have. So we should probably take care of it. Mm-hmm. And so they come back just completely shifted from a perspective standpoint. And so as I got to understand this phenomenon better and better and better and better, I said, what if we gave that experience to people who already have a strong disposition to make the world a better place, right? Because they already want to make a big impact. The challenge is they're still thinking in that way. So the intention's right, but the modality is wrong. We got to upgrade the operating system. So space is starting to become trendy. Mm-hmm. Space is starting to become popular, and more and more civilians are going to space for the first time ever. So space is very quickly going to become a thing. It's going to be like we'll be hanging out at sushi a month from now in the future, and we'll be like, we should all go on a vacation. We could go to Fiji. Or we could go to space. It'll be like that accessible. Mm-hmm. From a logistics standpoint, from a price point standpoint, like that'll be the conversation. It'll be like, we did Fiji a couple months ago. Let's do space. Mm-hmm. Like it'll be like that. So I'm pioneering a vertical within the space industry, because you have space exploration, which is NASA, and SpaceX to a degree, which is like, hey, let's see what's out there. Let's see how far we can go. Let's learn about space. Cool. Then you have space tourism, which is really just like, hey, you've had every experience in life pretty much so far. Here's one that you haven't. Mm-hmm. Let's take you somewhere new and different. That's cool. And then right in the middle, I'm pioneering this industry that I'm calling space transformation, which is, hey, let's use space as almost as a form of plant medicine to give people profound perspective shifts to then bring them back to Earth and make the planet a better place.
That's amazing. So when is your first trip? I know you already have people signed up.
Yes.
They're going, you're going, your wife's going.
Yes.
When is your first trip? And are you on what modality are you getting up there?
Yeah. So the first trip is in 2026. Mm-hmm. And that is going to be an atmospheric balloon ride. So that is a helium balloon that goes up 100,000 feet right to the edge of space. And it is about an 8-hour round trip. Mm-hmm. The capsule holds 8 people. And it's going to be really cool because there's still a little bit of a narrative in the collective consciousness of people that there's this fear of space. Mm-hmm. And there's some reasons for that. Yeah. Challenger and some of the tragedies that have happened have kind of stuck in our consciousness. Mm-hmm. So now, even though space tourism is starting to pick up, there's still a lot of hesitancy because people are like, I don't know. Mm-hmm. The technology has advanced so much, it's safer than ever. And the more you do it, the more you prove it, the easier it is for people to believe it. Sometimes people kind of need other people to go first to kind of be like, okay, they went first, it was fine. Mm-hmm. Okay, now I'll go. Yeah. So this first group is really going to be instrumental to more people waking up to like, oh, wow, okay. They not only did they go and was it fine, but they had this amazing experience. And now they're like dumping gasoline on a bonfire to like go change the world in this new and different way. So I think it'll be the catalyst for some really awesome stuff.
That's amazing. So when you're in this balloon, do you need a mask for air?
Nope. It's the capsule is pressurized.
Oh, okay.
Just like an airplane.
Oh, okay. I was actually thinking like a hot air balloon, and I'm like looking over the edge. I'm
Well,
like,
so it's imagine a really big hot air balloon attached to almost what looks like a UFO with 8 seats in it.
okay,
That's pressurized.
that makes more sense.
Yeah.
'Cause I was like, how would I not combust by just going up there in a balloon?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And so when you're up there, what will it look like? Because if you're an astronaut, you see the whole world.
Yeah.
When you're in a balloon, how much? Like, will I see a whole continent?
Oh yeah. You'll see. I believe you'll be able to see. I want to say close to 50% of the planet.
That seems pretty good.
Yeah, I think that'll be pretty cool.
Wow. So how did you get into this? I mean, it's just so interesting. You have this very successful career coaching, amazing people. You already make great money doing that. To then jump into, I'm starting a space company.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
Well, it's a number of things. I've always been a bit of like a closet space nerd. So there's that.
Like what? What's a nerd? What did you do?
Well, I just was always fascinated with space. I was in talks to work on a program with NASA about the effects of deep space travel on the body. And that was like almost 15 years ago. So space and space travel and all of that has just always been something that I've been fascinated with. 2020 and 21 was a big time for space because Richard Branson went to space, Jeff Bezos went to space, William Shatner went to space, and 4 civilians went to space.
And when they went to space, did they do the same similar atmospheric?
Nope, they did. So they went to like 0G space.
Above that then.
Yeah. So they went on a SpaceX rocket. So there was just all this awesome stuff happening in this space community. And I was like, wow, this is like civilians are going to space. Like space is starting to become trendy. And then I really started to lean into the overview effect. And I started to contrast that to my desires for civilization design. And I kind of like just put 2 and 2 together. In this day and age, you can have $1 billion company that owns no assets, like Airbnb and Uber, for example. So I was like, okay, if my piece of the puzzle is like the coaching, the integration, some neurofeedback training, none of that really requires a rocket. And there's other companies that have really kind of already nailed that part. So why don't I just utilize those and I'll take care of the rest? It's really not so much of a departure from what I've done. It's just simply adding space to the mix.
Adding space to it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing. And I think that I love the integration aspect of it because I think right now, I mean, you look at the world, there's a lot of things where you can just have the big experience.
Right.
But it's not even about that. It's about the bringing that experience back into your everyday life and the integration of it. And that's the piece that, I mean, it's missing in so many things these days.
Yes.
And I talk about a lot of them on the podcast. I talk about psychedelics a lot and things like that I'm like, you can't just have that. You got to integrate it.
Yeah.
And this is the same thing. And we were talking about this last night of like, what would it have looked like to work with the astronauts and people who've gone up there to then form a plan of how they felt? Like, what was that feeling? Yeah. Don't lose that. Bring that back to your everyday life. Yeah. And now what? Instead of just coming home and being like, all right, thanks for your service. And
well, that was, like many of the greatest technological advancements have come from somebody simply being like pissed off about something. Like Steve Jobs was like, what the hell? I want to carry my music around with me. And like, there's not really anything that's like up to par. Yeah. So he's like, fuck it. We're just making an iPod. I interviewed enough of these astronauts where I was like, wait, so you had this experience, like, and then what? And they were like, well, what do you mean? Then we just went back to work. Yeah. And I was like, fuck that. Yeah. Nobody wants to do this part of the thing. And so I just simply stepped in and was like, well, yeah, it makes total sense for me to do it.
When you were doing your interviews, what were they saying that was standing out to you that you're like, that could have been?
Well, it was just their reaction to the experience. It was It was their perspective shift on humanity, on what it means to be a part of the human race. And like that all the petty stuff that we squabble about is nothing, is stupid. So imagine if that person was able to take that and synthesize that into a message, into impact, right? But that was by and large one of the common themes, was like just that massive perspective shift. But kind of to your point, you know, you and I both know people who have like had crazy ayahuasca experiences, freaking talk to God. And then you see them a month later and you're like, so what are you doing? And they're like, nothing. Like, you know what I mean? So
because there is no path to help people right now. Yeah, do the thing.
It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, well, if it doesn't exist, I've never been afraid of creating something that doesn't exist. That's all been kind of my MO forever. So cool. Why don't I just do that? And everybody wins. So basically I called up, like I got on the phone with all the major space agencies and was like, so here's the deal. I'm going to work with these visionary entrepreneurs pre-space, because there's some things that I believe that you can do before you have the overview effect to prepare yourself for that. Kind of like before you do a medicine journey, you shouldn't drink a lot of alcohol, don't eat a lot of fried food, et cetera, right? To like maximize the experience. I believe you can do that from a neurofeedback standpoint as far as the overview effect. So there's a pre-thing, there's this whole post integration coaching aspect. And I was like, basically all I need your help with is to put them on a ride, which I'll pay for. And they were like, and all we have to do is say yes to this? And I was like, yes. And they were like, yes. Great. So now I have relationships with all the major space agencies and I can facilitate rides on pretty much all of their vehicles. So it's cool because that means that wherever someone is at, whatever type of experience somebody wants to have, I can help facilitate. So anything from an atmospheric balloon ride all the way up to a week-long stay on the International Space Station.
Wow. And how much is that?
110 million.
No big deal.
Yeah.
I'll wire it tomorrow.
I mean, hey, people have already done it.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, everything's possible.
But then the balloon ride, that's around 50,000.
Yeah.
Okay. What about, I mean, would NASA or someone come to you and be like, come work with our astronauts as well?
I don't believe they would, from the aspect of the overview effect integration. Because the NASA astronauts they're astronauts.
They're meant to do a job.
Yeah. Their job is to explore and pioneer that. They're not visionary entrepreneurs per se. So it's a different, that's why my company is called Astronaut. It's like a new breed of people who go to space.
It's a good brand.
Yeah. I couldn't believe that name was available, by the way.
Yeah.
It was like so obvious to me, Astronaut. And what that actually means, star sailor.
So good.
Fucking cool. And I was like, there's no way that's available. I think I have the .com, but more importantly, I have the LLC.
Yeah.
I was like, how? But, you know, sometimes like divine, you know, alignment and all that stuff. Wow. Just one of those things.
So when thinking about, you know, bringing people up there or working with people, I want to move into how you think about choosing people. And I specifically want to zoom in on a conversation we were having last night around the Dark Triad, because I have never heard of this.
Yeah.
I guess it's a hiring technique, but really you can use it as a life technique.
Yeah.
So I would love for you to talk about what is this Dark Triad. And this is when I mentioned in the intro, it's okay to be a psychopath. Yeah. That's actually a great thing if you're a psychopath.
Yeah.
This is what that was about. So
yeah. Well, so the Dark Triad is...
Triad. Got it wrong. Okay.
The Dark Triad is it essentially consists of psychopathy, sociopath, and Machiavellianism. And there's a personality test that was created called Hexaco.
And Hexaco measures those 3 personality traits. They call them the dark personality traits. So the first thing that's important for everybody to realize is that everyone has dark traits. Everyone. Mm-hmm. The question is how much and in what proportions. That's important to understand, especially when you're hiring for really critical roles. It's super important to know what dark qualities that person has and in what proportions, because those are very good indicators of how that person is going to behave, treat other people, etc. I have kind of my own version. I don't have people who are going to come to space with me take that.
That's what I was wondering.
No.
We have to know what these visionary people are going to do once they have this knowledge.
I would say yes if I didn't have 20 years of experience working with people and being able to get a read on a person very, very quickly. And to your point, like you can have a good degree of sociopath, for example, but it doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It doesn't mean that you have evil intentions. In fact, some of the most successful CEOs are high on the sociopath scale because it helps them focus on what needs to be done. And it allows them to take some of the emotionality out of the framework. So under the right circumstances, it's a good thing. Again, it just has to be in the right proportions in the right way. So
what was your results? Do you remember?
I don't remember. But I was pretty much even across the board with all 3, kind of like at a, I don't remember what percent. But
it's good to be kind of even.
Yeah,
you want to be. Look for?
Yeah, I think overall you want to be fairly like even.
Because you said you don't want to be, or the 2, that if you see someone with these 2, you probably might want to be careful of this combination.
Well, certainly Machiavellianism can be dangerous because that's a person who can have negative intent, and they're scheming. They think about how to play the chessboard in a way that possibly is hurtful to other people. And then if there's like a high level of maybe psychopathy or sociopath in there, then the feelings of other people are not as important. So they're very selfish in that. And it very much becomes a game of like, how can I get what I want? And if other people are expended or at their expense in that process, then that's okay. So those, that's where it becomes problem.
I'm definitely taking this test.
Take it.
After it. I want to see where I land.
But this is the important thing about this conversation is that, again, everyone has darkness. So when you get your results, it doesn't instantly mean like, oh no, I'm an evil person. It's just good things to be aware of, because then it's like any personality test. They help us illuminate parts of ourselves that we might not understand. And then simply understanding that side of ourself helps us navigate life more successfully, because we can work with that. Like, I'm a card-carrying introvert, and because I know that, I'm like, right, I'm going to limit the amount of people I hang out with, the type of people I hang out with, the times that I hang out with them, because just for my personality, anything other than that level of discernment gets me in trouble. So it's just simply a tool to help you be aware of yourself. And from a hiring perspective, it's helpful to know kind of who you're looking at. Yeah.
You had an interesting comment last night about empaths and how when you hear the word empath, you think, oh, that person just feels everything and like they're so sensitive and loving in a good way.
Yeah.
And you were like, but actually, just because an empath can feel everyone else doesn't mean they give a fuck actually about that person or where the feelings are coming from. It's just they can feel it.
Very often they don't. Because that would mean that you had everyone on your mind at all time. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Empaths can have a natural gift, if you will, to
intuit how someone is doing, positive or negative. So that's like someone who's really good at math. They don't necessarily care about math one way or the other. It's kind of like Good Will Hunting. He didn't really care about math. He wasn't like passionate about it, but he could look at the really challenging equations that no one else could solve and be like, oh, I understand that. I get that. So empaths just naturally get people, whether they're involved or not.
So moving into children.
Yeah.
I would love to hear your thoughts about, the world today and what kind of children we have in, the time that we're in.
Yeah.
And we talked a bit about Indigo Children last night. And that, to me, is a term that I hadn't thought about in a while.
Yeah.
Because there was a book I read a long time ago, like before I had kids, and it stuck with me. I was like, there's certain kinds of children who are coming to this world, but then I never thought about it again.
Yeah.
And so you brought this up last night, and I'm like, oh, wow. And I had actually the wrong idea of what, these different groups of children who are coming in could be coming here for.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to hear about, your thoughts around raising kids today and what they're here to do.
Well, from my observation, kids currently, not all of them, but many of them are the highest expression of evolution on the planet. So that's cool. To a large degree, what that means is what we should do as far as parenting is just get out of the way.
Yep.
And let them do what they innately know how to do. However, there are some parameters to that, because you have to think of it like many parents want their parenting to be like so much of the influence of that child's life. The intention of that is good. The execution is bad. So rather than thinking of parenting like being the river, to think of it like the banks of the river. If you have a child who is special in some way, most of society will want to label that child as if there's something wrong with them. Just that alone can be detrimental, because then the parent is going to treat that kid like there's something wrong with them. And it's almost that like that kind of cringy like sympathy, like, oh, you're like not quite like everyone else. Well, when you say it like that, like subconsciously, what are you really saying? Like, you're less than. Ultimately. That's not cool, because if anything, they're like not less than, they're on the other side of the scale. So it's super critical as a parent to understand what you're working with, right? We were talking about ADHD last night, and how really, for what it is, that term is actually really inappropriate, because it's not a disease. In many people's observation, myself included, it's actually a high expression of brain function under the right circumstances. So many people who have ADHD are put into a box with neurotypical people. If you take a neurodivergent person and you try to fit them in a neurotypical box, it does not work at all. We see that with children. So to understand what you're dealing with, is your child an empath? Because they're going to feel everything. So you got to know how to be with that. You got to know how to help them navigate that. Are they highly gifted from the perspective of, let's just say like mathematics or something like that? You have to know how to deal with that. Indigo children specifically, they almost all have a sense of the world and what's not right with it, that most people just kind of take for granted and just is not a big deal. They just go on their day to day. But like indigo children will look at like certain foods, for example, and be like, that's bad. And they won't know how or why they know that. They'll just know intuitively. Or they'll look at structures within society, like school, public school, and be like, that's not, that's making kids stupid. Things like that. Things that there's no way that they would know, they just know.
And they're only born during certain time periods, right? Like the comment I made to you,
wave,
it's like, oh, my kids sound like that. And you're like, well, actually, like they probably wouldn't be because it's a
timing thing. They come in waves. So star children, yes, that's a like a blanket term for these gifted children. And then there's kind of different waves within that. But yeah, simply to really, bring that one home, to understand your child as best as possible, to help them be with who they are in a way that makes it really okay for them to be who they are, to not make them feel like they're less than or whatever, or that they have a disease. Like ADHD is not a good term for that. The term we talked about last night is VAST, which is variable attention stimulus trait. That's a way better way to describe it, because you have this brain that can switch and activate in a light speed and is aware of a million things a second. And if you give it the right conditions, is genius. It's a way better way to describe it. Because disease is something you have to solve for. You have all these people who are brilliant that think that there's something wrong with them, that take medication and do all these things to fix the disease. It's not a disease. You just gotta be in the right environment. Powerful stuff.
I heard from, I forget who this, it was probably in this book I read called Energy Codes.
Yeah.
Super good. Like how to work with energy throughout your body and your chakras. And a lot of it's all breath work and like learning to work with that. Yeah. But her whole thing was to not label things.
Yeah.
Even when you have something going on in your body, to not quickly put a label against it, because then it's an instant problem.
Yeah.
Instead of, maybe it's just I'm experiencing what the feeling is, what's happening, but not being like, oh yeah, I have, let's just say, a migraine.
Yeah.
Like, and so same thing here. Like the second you start labeling kids, it's a problem. It's a thing that needs to be sorted out versus how do I get to work with the way that they are?
Yeah.
Which, I mean, now with having 4 kids in my house, I see that if I were to treat all of them the same, it would not work very well.
Yeah,
and
completely.
The first time I started doing, human design, I did that for the kids because that's just a birth date and where you were born.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I realized how the kids were able to work with their energy.
Yeah.
And how some of my kids, like they get filled up by being around people. And then when they are having a hard time, it's actually better for them to process it with me.
Yeah.
Together. You don't want to leave them by themselves. It's like they really need like the co-regulation and just being together. Whereas one of our others, they actually need more alone time.
Yeah.
And if they're having a hard time and they say they want space, it's best to give them space. And if they don't always know it, it's better to like help urge them to like get in their own energy and just be on their own.
Yeah.
And when I learned that, I'm like, man, if I had that when I was younger, what could have been done?
Oh yeah.
Because I had a twin, I had a brother.
Right.
We were all treated the same.
Yeah, of course.
You do this, you do that, you get spanked if not.
Yeah.
Or you're now grounded for, a long, long time.
Right.
And it was just all the same.
Yeah.
And it's cool seeing an age of parents now who, know like that. All our parents did the best that they could.
Yeah.
And it's a new time to try something different.
Completely.
All right. So to wrap up this interview, I haven't actually done this in a while on the show, but I'm bringing it back for you because I feel like you're going to have some interesting thoughts. So it's called the lightning round.
Okay.
And you just have to say the answer quickly. You don't get too long to think about it.
Okay.
Of like whatever comes to mind.
Sure.
So the first one, so as someone who spends a lot of time teaching and coaching, who are 2 people that you look to for that?
Tony Robbins has certainly been a huge influence. I had some very kind of challenging times when I was younger, and his work helped me navigate those successfully. And as funny as it sounds, I'm not even super religious per se, but Jesus is a big one for me because of the example that he set as far as what's possible in the capacity to love another person. And if that's something that I constantly come back to, of like, wow, he made people who are like beggars, thieves, prostitutes feel as if they were loved as much and as worthy as anybody else. That's a gift. And so if I can even approximate some of that, I think that's a good thing.
That's good. 2 good answers. What is a book that everyone should read?
The New Intellectuals by Ayn Rand.
Okay. Yep.
It's a great one.
That is a good one. What is a favorite piece of advice that you've received that's stuck with you till today?
It's always do your best.
I like that. What's a lifestyle habit that you started doing that transformed your whole life?
2 things. I really got on top of drinking water.
That's good. Drinking water is great.
as simple as it sounds, most people are terrible at it.
Mm-hmm.
Most people are truly terrible at it. And the amazing thing is when you drink adequate amounts of water, your whole life changes.
Mm-hmm.
Your sleep gets better, your digestion gets better, your skin gets clearer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's a game changer. So I really started taking that seriously. The other thing I started taking seriously was sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Really getting on top of sleep and understanding more of the science of that. Also a very big game changer.
Mm-hmm. Agree on both of those. What is something that you believe right now that most people disagree with?
That we are on the verge of an age of abundance.
Mm-hmm. Expand on that a little bit more.
Well, I think because of the news and because of some of the current way that the world exists right now, many people believe that we are on the verge of kind of like a dark
Mm-hmm.
chapter. And based on my observation and what I see coming and what I am a part of creating, I see a massive, massive age of abundance.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that optimistic view. And I actually agree with you on that. So
Yeah.
that's awesome.
All right.
Well, Shannon, this was awesome. Thanks for coming on the show. Where
Yes.
can people learn more about you, your work, getting to space? Where do you
Yeah.
want to direct them to?
Instagram I think is
Mhm.
great. At the Shannon Graham.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.